few years ago, when I was in seminary, we used to do the March for Life every year. And they still do the trip, but I'm not involved with it anymore. But at the time, as a seminarian, what we would do is we would get out of school for a week, so everybody jumped on board with going. It was a bus trip to Washington, D.C. for the March for Life, a lot of fun. But what would happen is that we, as seminarians, a lot of times we would take on some leadership roles with it. So what we would do is we would typically have a bus. We would have multiple buses that were going, and we treated each bus like a rolling retreat center, basically. You have a captivated audience for 26 hours on a bus. You need to do something with them, right? So we always had some kind of programming. Typically what we would do is a couple of the roles. The first role was we had somebody who was like kind of the, for lack of a better word, was a logistics person, right? They were kind of the muscle. They were the ones that made sure everybody was paying attention, had what they needed, right? We would just kind of say like, this is what we're doing this day, right? Boom, 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 and give like the schedule and that kind of stuff, right? So they kind of gave the structure. Then the other person was the role that the seminarian, or myself, a lot of times we fulfilled, was we did the youth minister role, right? Like we were the ones that kind of led the prayer or led like the talks or like the reflection times or whatever we had. We were the ones that kind of broke open themes and concepts with the theme as long as we were going on the trip. So it was myself, and I was partnered with a buddy of mine. He's an educator. So he and we were going back and forth, and like we were playing off of each other. We were having a lot of fun. It was a really great trip. And at one point, we were finishing up something. I can't remember if we were in D.C. or we were on our way home. But as we were finishing up a certain like little portion, right? We kind of gave the students a break. And it was just a really good time. We had kids getting up and like sharing their testimonies, and we had some like really, really good prayer stuff and like some good reflection stuff going on. So it was just a really, really good vibe on the bus itself. And we finish up, we wrap up, I sit down, he sits down, and we both kind of like just kind of taking a breath and just kind of chatting between ourselves. And at one point he looked at me. Now this guy, married, has a couple of kids, right? Educator, good guy, and maybe about 6-7 years older than me. And he looks at me at one point and he says, "Man, you are so lucky." And I was like, "For what?" You know, like, and he goes, that like you get to do this kind of stuff for the rest of your life. Now, I was a couple of years away from being ordained at the time, so I was at Notre Dame, had been in formation at this point for probably about 5 or 6 years, and like it was awesome because like I was able to start putting like what we were learning in school to use, right? Actually being able to break open the scriptures and teach and preach and do some of these things and minister to students, and I didn't have the sacraments yet, we couldn't do that part, but I could do all the other stuff, right? Like, and it was awesome like, to just start feeling the competency of it, and when he said it, I was like, yeah, you're right, you know, like I was sitting there kind of thinking, I'm like, this is a good life. This is going to be fun, right? I'm going to have a parishioners, like I'm going to have the best church in the diocese, check, right? Like I'm going to have like the most people coming, check, right? No, I'm kidding. Wouldn't measure it with anybody else, but you know, Father Brian. Anyway, so I like, it was just like, it was a really cool moment, like just to be able to kind of reflect for a second. And then almost immediately, like I started, like it wasn't just what he said, it's how he said it. And I looked at him and I said, well, say more. And he's like, well, I'm married, and like I got 2 kids, and it's great, but like you're going to be able to be like in front of a congregation and ministering to people and doing all these things. And then I kind of stopped for a second. I just looked at him and I said, he finished it off by saying, "I'm jealous of what you got." And at that point, my thought process shifted. Because I looked at him and I said, "Married with 2 kids, right?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "It's interesting. I'm jealous of you." And he kind of stopped for a second. He looked at me and said, "What you mean?" I said, "As a priest, 95% of the people I see on the weekend, and 95% of the people that I minister to, I get 10 minutes with them in a homily. Well, 15, 20, 25, 30, anyway, right? Like, but like as a priest, I get 1 homily a week. That's 95% of my people. They're going to hear me 1 homily a week. That's pretty much it. And then I got my daily mass crowd. It's another 3 or 4% of the crowd, right? Like I see them, and they get the rest of the homilies and all the like a little bit more off the cuff homilies and off the cuff stories. And then a couple of people like come see me throughout the course of the week. But for the most part, 95% of my people, I get 15 minutes a week. I said, you, on the other hand, have 128 hours with your wife and your 2 kids. I said, who has a better chance of having an impact? it was interesting because as we were talking about it, right, like in the context in which we were on this retreat, on this trip, right, it seemed like, man, all these things that you get to do just seem like so great and so wonderful, right? You get to preach, you get to teach, you get to be in front of people, a microphone, all these things, right? Whatever, like, and there is something beautiful about like the life that I have. I'm not trying to say that, but it was interesting because he wasn't recognizing at the time the beauty of the life that he was in. And the reason why I bring that up today is because it's not, like, I think a key when it comes to our life, our Christian life, our life in living the faith, right? It's not so much, most of the time, the point is not so much, I want to do that thing. I need to do those things. I need to fill up that list of things before God. I mean, more importantly, it's not about all the things that we do for God, but are we doing what it is that God is asking us to do? We don't have to have a perfect and full to-do list before God. We don't have to do 100% of all these things that we're supposed to do. I need to make sure I go do this and do this and do this and have this book and have these things and have this novena and pray these things and say these prayers today. You know? We don't have to fill up a list before God. We have to completely do what He's asking us to do. When I was a seminarian, I remember my first year in seminary. I'm a seminarian. I'm supposed to be doing all the holy stuff. And like people are saying, you should try and pray this, and you should try and do this, and you should try these things. And if you're not doing this, then you're not going to be a good priest, and all this kind of stuff, right? And I remember came to Lent, and I sat down with my spiritual director, and I looked at my spiritual director, and he said, "What is it that you're doing for Lent?" And I looked at him and said, "Oh, I got a list." And I listed off 9 things. And he looked at me and he said, "Yeah, you're not doing 9 things." I was like, yeah, but like I need to do this. Like I'm going to fast on these days. I'm going to sleep on the floor. I'm going to do this. I'm going to give up hot water. I'm going to like all these kind of things. I had all kind of like dumb ideas. But anyway, like it was like I had a list of things. And he looked at me and he said, you need to pick 2 and do those well. You don't need to do all the things. You need to do the things that you're going to pick well. Why do I say, I think today, the reason why I'm bringing all of that up is mainly because today's gospel is so familiar for most of us, right? I've heard, I can't tell you how many times in 8 years as a priest that I have heard somebody come up to me and go, I'm just a Martha, right? Like, I just act and I go and I run and I do, and then like I forget about Jesus there. Like, and I think all of us have a little bit of Martha in us, right? Like we want to produce, we want to do, we want to make sure everything is perfect and right. That's not a bad thing. But the most important thing today is that that's not just the context of the gospel. Like I think we've all familiar with the story. We're familiar with the sisters of Mary and Martha. We're familiar that Martha is the workaholic and Mary is the one who's the goody-good, right? She's the one that teaches pet. She's sitting down and she's reminding Jesus about the homework, right? Like that's who they are. We know these things. But I do think there's something more to this story today. Because notice what Jesus doesn't condemn. Jesus doesn't look at Mary and say, stop doing all that. Don't do any of that. All those things are useless. All those things are bad. He does not do that today. Being a Martha is not a bad thing. It's just not the best. And I find in my life that what can happen is that I can waver back and forth between Mary and Martha, Mary and Martha, Mary and Martha. Why? Because there's sometimes that I do look at my relationship with God as a transactional relationship, as I do all these things you give me. Because look at today's gospel. What happens is that 13 people show up to Mary, Martha, and Lazarus' house, right? We're talking about 3 people that are best friends with Jesus. He's not calling ahead. He just shows up. He's a Cajun, right? Like, we know this about Jesus, right? Like, he just shows up at somebody's house unannounced and brings the whole family, the whole crew, and they all walk into the house. So what happens? They come in, and Martha is like, I need to feed these people. I need to give coffee to these people. I need to give everybody everything they need. We need to sit down, and I want to make sure everybody's taken care of. Martha is my grandmother, right? Baby, you want some tata labui? You want some coffee? You want some, right? Like, I'm going to put out everything we need and make sure everybody have whatever they need, right? Like, that's what it is that Martha does. Mary, on the other hand, is so excited to see Jesus that she doesn't worry about that and she goes and sits with him. And then the issue comes up. Martha's serving, Martha's running around, Martha's giving, Martha's making sure that everything's made up in the house perfect. And she gets upset. And as she gets upset, what happens is, it's interesting because it says that when she comes to Jesus and tells him, right? She comes to Jesus and she says, are you not worried that I'm doing all the serving? Tell my sister to come and help me, right? The interesting thing is the verb that is used in Greek is the same verb that would be used for a master telling a slave something. So when Martha does this, she is commanding at Jesus. She is barking at Jesus. She is angry, and she's taking it out on Jesus. Some people want to be like, she's like meek and just kind of like, hey, can you tell her to come help? No. Martha got some attitude, right? So like when she does this, she looks at him and she says, you see her? She's doing nothing. Tell her to come help. She's got Jesus Christ. She's got the Son of God. She's got like God made man sitting in the fulfillment of every promise of the Old Testament, sitting in her house. And what does she do? She tells him what he's supposed to be doing. Martha's Cajun, right? Martha's my grandmother. No, I'm kidding, right? But I say that because it's interesting because there's so many times whenever, I know in my life, when I'm in the Martha mindset, if you will, right? When I'm in this kind of like transactional faith kind of mindset, that I'm like, God, I am doing all the things you're asking. I pray every day. I go to Mass every week. I bring my kids. I send them to Catholic school, right? I go to confession even sometimes, right? Like I do everything you ask. I don't eat meat on Fridays during Lent. I do all the prayers that I'm supposed to do. I make sure that everybody's taken care of and like I'm a pretty good person. I got check. I'm just asking for one thing. I'm just asking, I just want you to do one thing for me. Fix this issue. Make this person right. Make this not hurt. Make this fixed, right? Make this okay, whatever it is. God, I'm doing all these things. Can you not just do that? It's a transactional faith. It's a contract. I hold up my end of the bargain, you hold up yours. It's a vending machine. I put the money in, you give me the goods. It's a transactional faith so often. That's not our relationship with God. Doing more doesn't necessarily mean get more. Doing all these things doesn't necessarily mean that now, God, you're my slave and you're going to do whatever I tell you. Which the language actually of the scripture is what Martha's attitude was. Jesus' response to her is powerful too. Because when Jesus says to her, he doesn't look at her and say, don't talk to me like that. He doesn't look at her and say, all that stuff you're doing is a waste, it's bad, it's useless, it's all these things, right? What Jesus says to her very, very simply is you're focused on the wrong stuff. You're distracted from the most important thing. You're anxious and worried about many things. He doesn't condemn the things, but he says, why are you so worked up about them? Why are you so worried about the checklist? Why are you so worried about having done all these things? This. When the most important thing is what Mary has been focused on. Me. The most important thing is not the checklist. It's not that you did all the things. It's not that you have a list of 9 things you're going to do for Lent, or all of the prayers, or the little book that's fallen apart now because you've been praying through it so much. The most important thing is not that. It's not just checking stuff off of a list. The most important thing is not a thing at all. It's me. And that's what Mary's focused on first, is me. Mary has chosen the better part. Not the good part as opposed to the bad. No. The better. You're doing good things, but you're missing the point. Think about it. All of the stuff she does in her house is supposed to be to cater to hospitality, to cater to the freedom, to cater to the room of people being together. and she's removed herself from the room. So often, I think, in our relationship with God, we can think we have to do more. We can think we have to check off boxes. We can think we have to fit a certain role or fit a certain space. But in reality, the first and most important thing that the Lord is looking for is not what we do for him, but it's us. He's not looking for what we do. He's looking for us. There's a very popular story of Mother Teresa. When her convent in Calcutta was just exploding with vocations, and it was super busy, and they had a lot of stuff going on. They had a lot of different, they were starting to expand their ministry very, very vastly, very, very quickly. And she was talking to one of her sisters, and one of her sisters comes up to her and says, Mother, we have this schedule, and we have Mass and a holy hour. We have all these things that we're doing in the morning. If we wouldn't have so much prayer time, we could do so much more. And Mother Teresa's sitting there, and she's just taking it into account, and she's like, okay, thank you. And she's so the sister was like, is there any way that we could maybe manipulate the schedule or cut back on some of the prayer time so we could do more for the people we're trying to minister to? Mother Teresa was like, I'll take it into consideration. The next day or the next week, whenever they posted the schedule, they had a shift in their schedule. Instead of having 1 hour of prayer, they had 2. Because she knew that what they did was fruitless if it wasn't first rooted in the Lord. What would it look like? What would our schedule, what would our life look like if everything that we did first was rooted in the Lord? I think of my buddy, how would it change being a dad? How would it change being a husband? How would it change being a mom, a wife, right? How would it change the way that I approach work, the way that I approach my day? How would it change what we do with our free time? Everything, right, changes whenever we first put all of our attention on our relationship with God. Not a checklist with God, but a relationship with God. As we come to Mass today, I know sometimes when we hear this gospel, we can jump right into I'm too much of a Martha, I'm not enough of a Mary. But in reality, God, there's a balance of both. But are we giving priority to the most important things? To the most important thing, the most important person? Today as we come to Mass, as we enter into the mysteries, as we enter into this next week, where is it that the Lord might just be inviting us to prioritize him first? We all have a checklist, and we all have a list of to-dos that is longer than is longer than the aisle, right? I'm with you on that. But do we give priority to the most important? Do we give God our first fruits? May today as we come to Mass that we give God the attention that he deserves. Not just to check off a box. Sunday Mass, good to go. Now time for lunch, right? But may we first give priority and focus to our relationship with God, not just the checklist.